America goes all in on AI, $500 billion to make the perfect AI systems.
Welcome to the All Future podcast, where we talk all things tech, AI, and various subjects throughout the week. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching, we're back in the studio today with Matt.
Back in the studio.
And today we're talking about this new Stargate thing, which is a $500 billion deal to fund AI in the U.S. And the interesting thing is that this is mainly a partnership with OpenAI. You would expect at this point probably that it would be like XAI or something, but they don't seem to actually be involved. So this is a joint venture between OpenAI, SoftBank, and Oracle to build infrastructure for artificial intelligence and create over 100,000 jobs. Just your initial impressions, Matt, based on this headline.
First of all, Stargate is one of the best sci-fi movies of the 90s. Everyone should go see it if they have not seen it. Excellent movie. Ancient Egypt, aliens, top-notch. Top-notch film. Now, that being said, let's talk about this. First impressions, cool. I feel like this is not even like that unusual of a thing the federal government gives monies and grants all time to different sectors to do all kinds of things, whether it's directly giving them money or setting up tax incentives or whatever, all kinds of stuff like that. So that I don't think that's super surprising. It is kind of interesting, the partner list here with OpenAI, Oracle, but it's, I think, the note behind the note, if you will, to use like a kind of a filmmaking term here, I think is what they're doing is there's an arms race, man. This is an AI arms race, right? Mm-hmm. And the federal government recognizes that, and whether we want this technology or not, other countries are going to develop it, right? Yeah. And if we want to maintain our ability for the United States to kind of do whatever it wants, for better or for ill in this world, we need to be just as strong as the other guy on the block, right? And the other guy, in this case, China, really, for the most part. So we're going to need to do these kinds of investments to make this stuff. 100,000 new jobs, that's cool. I'd be really interested to see how they got that number and what those jobs are in.
And is it just building up the data centers and then they go away?
Is that how many construction workers they're going to need? Yeah. And then janitors to keep it clean, right? Like, who are actually getting all these jobs? Obviously, there's going to be some skilled workers in there as well, some high-tech workers. But so that's kind of my first kind of thoughts on it, is that this kind of investment, I think, is, I don't want to say necessary evil, but kind of necessary evil. Like, I think the government needs to be backing this thing, needs to make sure America is a place that's conducive to this type of development and research, so that we can maintain the ability of the United States to continue to prosper and have the choice to, for lack of a better word, if we need to go to worse places, we can do that. If we need to defend America, we can do that. And this AI is the new atomic weapon, right? This is the Manhattan Project. Like, we're in a race, and we need to make sure that we can outdo these guys, and that's part of it.
Yeah, man, I haven't really made the full connection on the Manhattan Project and how the importance of this. But having just seen Oppenheimer and like the seriousness of that mission, this does kind of feel like that. So it's going to have about 20 data centers, each about 500,000 square feet, and 100 billion is committed immediately, with the remainder to be deployed over the next 4 years. I'm very interested to see where this goes and what all gets built here. Previous projects that I can think of that had a lot of government funding, just that I'm aware of in my space, were EV charging infrastructure, and the money was committed, but we've seen very little build out of actual EV charging infrastructure, which I think has hurt EVs as a whole, because you have a headline to say, this much money was committed, this is how few chargers we have. Yeah.
So anyone who's worked for the federal government knows about October, which is when the government's fiscal year starts. And they have the saying, spend it when you get it, right? And to use your EV example, all that money's getting pulled now. So that money is disappearing. So the fact that they didn't get to spend it means it's just not going to happen. So the trick with government funding for anything is the second the government writes you a check, spend all that cash immediately, because at any time they can pull it away or tie it up in red tape and all this kind of stuff. And this is why every fighter squadron I was in, and rescue squadron, and special ops squadron when I was in the Air Force, come October, we always got new TV sets in the briefing rooms and all this kind of stuff. Because all of a sudden we got to spend this money because the federal government is built on this idea of, if you don't spend it, we're going to spend it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So and it was something like this. It's such a big commitment, right? It's going to take years to build this stuff out. So you're going to need to maintain that political will for years to actually see the fruition of this. We'll see how it goes. I suspect that there's going to be continued interest from in a bipartisan way from our government to continue to grow our AI capabilities. So I think this stuff is probably going to happen.
Yeah, and it does seem to be, like you said, kind of this race against China mainly. I can't really think of another country, at least on the same scale of AI development. Of course, there's the companies that make the chips and make stuff in other countries. But as far as like heavily investing in it and like the entire culture and everything being built on it, seems like China's the main competitor. And speaking of China, they just came out with DeepSeek, which is one of their LLMs, and apparently it's getting up close to ChatGPT's heels with their best models.
Right. So it's supposedly just as good as O1 model for ChatGPT, which is, I've never used O1. Do you?
No, yeah.
Yeah, because it's really not for kind of what we do. We use AI stuff for. It's really more for advanced research stuff, advanced mathematical models, all this kind of stuff, right? So if you want to have an AI that gives you an actual like edge in things that matter, this is the model to go against, right? So that China's getting supposedly close to its performance with this DeepSeek model. We're going to continue to see headlines like this, not just from China, but from other companies, other countries all over the place, because they're chasing. The OpenAI is still, I think, considered the kind of thought leader and the actual leader in the AI space. So it's the one that everything's going to get compared against. It's how you're going to measure whether your model is working that well. So yeah, this is going to keep happening, and we'll just have to. This is where we just have to decide, right? Like, I mean, the world, the country, I don't know, everybody. Like, hey, like, do we even want to deal with this stuff? Do we want to get involved with it? And if we do, it's almost like, well, you got to play to win then, right? It's just going back to that Oppenheimer kind of comparison, right? It's all like you got to play to win, and so that's China's mindset as well. You know, like they are looking at. I mean, you already look at kind of the AI learning that they've unleashed on things through different apps and algorithms and stuff like that. Like, you're just going to keep seeing that across the board. And I think that America seems to have the will to keep up with it. So every time I see these headlines, oh, China did this, or whoever, any other country, Russia, somewhere in the EU, whatever, I got faith in Americans' ability to try to make money from a thing, and that will always keep it going forward, which is what's happening with AI.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we have Google, one of the main competitors to OpenAI, and they want 500 million Gemini users by the end of this year, 2025. I guess I don't know what their current user number is, but in order to enable this, they've introduced a free tier for Gemini for workplace users, workspace users, and they're eliminating certain fees, and then Gemini is now being integrated with workspace subscriptions. The funny thing, though, is that they are increasing certain workspace subscriptions as a result. So it's kind of just reorganizing how it's priced, but they're making a free tier, which gets more users into Gemini, gets them more training, and gets more people to see what these tools are like and potentially end up relying on them and needing to pay for them once they make you pay again.
Right. And we talked about this months and months ago, that Google doesn't actually have to be better than OpenAI at anything, because Google can just go, well, we're just gonna make ours free. You know, it's like they don't care, right? They're like, let's just make this free. We'll just burn billions of dollars on this because we can, which is not really in the same way an option that OpenAI has or some of the other competitors. And even OpenAI at $20 a month for their kind of the standard user tier on the OpenAI side, they're still losing money on that. They're still like burning through cash on keeping the thing running right now. So I think Google is going to have to, like everything Google has done, right? let's make it free, and then we'll figure out how we can make money later, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every single major. What are the most popular Google products? Probably search, maps, mail, and YouTube, right? All things that started completely free, right? And then they're like, well, how do we monetize it? Well, we'll put some ads in there. Or, oh, well, now we're going to add this paid kind of thing. So you get more storage space, or you don't get ads, or whatever, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
That's 100% going to be their plan with AI. Why wouldn't it be the plan for Gemini? Because it's worked incredibly well for them. You know, like that's why they're, you know, one of the most richest, powerful companies in the world. So this doesn't surprise me that this is what they're doing. I suspect we're going to continue seeing this and continue seeing breakouts of the prices until they find the sweet spot. Just the other thing they don't really know yet is how much are people actually willing to pay for this? And if I want to get 500 million users, how many of those can I convert to, say, a $500 a month fee? And is that so many that it makes more sense to set mine at $5 a month than, say, $15 a month, right? Because it gets me so many more of these users.
Yeah.
500 million, that's a huge user base. I mean, it's more than the population of the United States. You know, so that's like, it's a huge, huge number. And I would be curious as what they mean by users. Do they mean regular users? Or do they mean someone that pops in once a month and does something? You know, like where are they actually doing these metrics? But yeah, this is just that continued evolution that we've talked about for a while here.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see the pricing structure also, like you're saying, decrease for a while. And then this is definitely integrating with all the workspace stuff, which includes all of the tools that I'm assuming you use some of, right? Do you use some of the Google Workspace stuff?
Yes, but not like regularly, almost just because it's built into the system now, right? But it's rare for me to do that. Like, I'm just not using Google stuff that often, really. You know, like I don't use Google Docs for writing, so I'm not seeing it there. I do use Gmail mostly, though, through a third-party app system, Apple Mail or whatever, right? So it's rare for me to actually like directly see those things. And I know I'm probably a little bit of an anomaly here. I mean, a lot of people, you know, live and die on Google Sheets and you know, Google Docs and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, like I've never, well, except outside of screwing around with it so that I have the knowledge base so I can come on here and talk to you, I've never really, I don't really engage with Gemini as a direct LLM, you know, because I find that still Chat GPT is better. And that's, again, anecdotal. That's to me. Maybe for whatever you do, Gemini will be better. But in general, what I use GPT for, you know, it's, hey, can you help me figure out how to cut this board on the house I'm restoring or something like that? Like it's kind of these like basic queries that the voice interface and interaction with GPT is just better for me.
So a similar approach is being taken by Microsoft at this point as well. They're making Copilot free with pay-as-you-go agents. So this is specifically for businesses, and you can chat with Copilot, and then once you're actually doing things and having it do stuff for you with the AI agents, it's pay-as-you-go, which I think is actually probably where we're going to get in the future. And then it's like kind of a good way to get you in there because it's like instead of paying a subscription and getting unlimited, a subscription price that might be kind of high to consider for you for using AI, you pay as you go, so you kind of get that direct exchange, and you see, oh, this result, you know, saved me this much time. I only paid this many dollars. This is worthwhile. But definitely a different approach, flexible pricing model. I think most people are doing normal subscription fees and probably isn't sustainable long term. So this is probably where we're headed, but this is kind of a cool thing, I think. I don't use Copilot, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to use this feature.
Well, definitely in the business world. I mean, Microsoft is still, especially with you know, Microsoft 365, all this kind of stuff. You know, Microsoft is still very ingrained in a lot of the business world. So I could see this making a lot of sense for some people. Depending on what you want that agent to do, these kind of prices could really pay off. And I don't know how you do your business, like, but I'm not a good business owner, guys. Like I'm just like I know you can do all these formulas for like, oh, I'm expending this amount of money and my actual cost for this is this and it's getting this much return on me. I'm always just kind of eyeballing it and I'm like, man, like, well, that thing made money and this is kind of breaking even. Like, you know, or I lost a little money here. I'm sure I'd be a much more successful businessman if I actually cared about the numbers, you know. But in these larger companies, you have whole teams of people whose job it is to figure this out. So you can go, oh, like a pay-as-I-go agent is actually like that one. I'm whatever. We can just make up any kind of number. I pay $200 for an agent and it makes me $300 for what it executes. Boom. That makes a lot of sense. right? But then you go, oh, but it's, at the corporate structure, it's $1,000 a month for the subscription for it. Oh, now that doesn't make any more sense, right? Like I should just pay as I go, right? So I think for some businesses, especially ones where AI agents can really integrate and make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There's probably people where this absolute a sweet spot, and they're like, oh yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, and it's a great way to get you in to start using it and test it out without having to pay that full amount. And then it convinces you this is worthwhile. And then you pay the full subscription amount long term, and they get you in that ecosystem. But all this stuff, I really want to know what the numbers are behind the scenes. Like, how much are they losing on this training and everything with the energy consumption?
Ungodly amount of money, man. Like billions, right?
And they like you're saying, are always thinking about numbers. So they probably have a graph somewhere of where they think like training cost is coming down and then user base is going up and usage. But I would just love to know, like, every time I'm using my $30 a month subscription or whatever for a month, how much did it cost you to provide that to me?
Yeah, I mean, probably a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you do. I mean, they have all these kind of, little examples of what's the energy consumption every time you query ChatGPT or generate an image on Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or whatever. And it's always like, oh, well, I'm burning through cash on this thing, right? So
feels like MoviePass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very similar kind of setup where you're like, they cannot possibly be making money on this, right? Like their goal is to like kind of make money down the road on it, which for better or for worse is kind of post the kind of turn of the century 2000s after the initial .com bubble burst. That's been the model of all tech companies. It's like, we're going to lose money, and a lot, for a long time. And eventually we'll have the chance to make a lot of money. And how that has played out is that some of those bets have absolutely failed, right? And they've burned through money and it's gone nowhere. But the ones that have paid off so big with so much money that these companies are now the richest, most powerful organizations on the planet outside of government, right? And so that's when you're looking at this and you're like, oh, well, if I'm the guy at Microsoft and I'm like, oh, well, we're losing, It's like, yeah, but if this works, man, like it's to the stratosphere, right? And me as the CEO, his one job is to return investments for shareholders. That's legally what he has to do, his fiduciary responsibility. So he goes, hey, I think I can do my job good if this works. So, we'll see how it all plays out. It's interesting that to be in this time period of it where people are clearly experimenting with it. People are trying to learn from the past, I think, too, and that I think you can look at Google and look at how many things they spent a lot of money on that never made money for them, right? Google Spaces, or all these other kind of things. There's a ton of examples. Google Plus, like this, and then obviously Microsoft has plenty of examples like that too. Things, the Zune, whatever.
Oh man, the Zune.
Yeah, right. Like huge things they invested in which didn't pay out for them. And I think that's why you're seeing kind of early in the life cycle of this AI stuff, a lot of experimentation with pricing models and customer delivery and what space we fit into. Because, every kind of tech leader is taught those horror stories. It's like, there's always some old guy who was there and be like, I remember when the Zune failed, and it's like, and it's like, I don't want to be that guy. Let me do these things. And that's what we're seeing play out.
Yeah. And then these are the main companies we're talking about are OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft. But then the big one, of course, is Apple. And what is their role in all of this is kind of the big question. And we talked in another episode about how they're pulling AI summaries of news because it's not going well. They're trying to get more things on the customer side right now and deliver things that sell phones. But it still feels like with all of this development that's happening on this level, where you're talking flexible pricing models, you're talking Google trying to get 500 million users by making a new free tier, and there's all of this development and competition, feels like they're just kind of gonna end up sitting back to a certain degree and be able to just keep selling phones until this really catches up to where consumers are at the level of going, hey, I need this feature that Microsoft provides. But that still seems like, I don't know, I feel like they can take kind of, to reference another video, a Nintendo approach where it's like you have your nerds that need the latest, greatest thing, but then you have the people who need just the thing that is great for them. And I think they're going to be fine sitting back and relaxing and waiting on AI stuff, but it is tough because it requires so much training. So what do you think their approach will be long term? Do you think they're still going to be able to do it internally, Apple, once they need to deliver these features?
I do. But I think the question is, when is that going to be, and are they going to ever need it to, right? They
Yeah.
can always just partner with somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So like that's the whatever the check down pass they can always do is just like, it's not working for us. Let's just toss it to this guy in the flats here because that's gonna make sense and they will still score and it'll be great. So like Apple. Here, the Nintendo comparison I think is very apt because Apple doesn't have to do anything. We've talked about this before. What would it take to make us switch out of having an iPhone to an Android phone? An immense amount. That phone has to be crazy better, right? Because we're so integrated into that Apple ecosystem. We're so just used to, of course I'm getting an iPhone. Like, I don't even think about it. I never really consider getting an Android phone. The only thing I've kind of considered is one of those like dumb phones that are the e-ink displays or whatever. I'm like, that's kind of cool. I'm kind of into that. But that's less features. That's going the other way, right? Like going the more features way. It needs a ton.
Yeah.
And so and Apple knows that, right? Like Apple absolutely knows that. So they go, they're dabbling in it with Apple Intelligence, but right now, certainly this cycle, it hasn't really mattered yet in terms of phone sales. Will it matter in a couple cycles? Maybe, probably. But I think Apple has the resources and the customer base that allows them the luxury of time.
Yeah, and you talked about a partnership there, and they could do that. And that's really what Microsoft is doing. These are GPT-powered queries that are powering the Copilot stuff. So I think we're going to see a lot of that collaboration for the products that really matter, and we really need to have that. They can just partner with somebody and maybe refine it in some ways, but that does seem to be where the future's going with this. But I always love watching this back and forth growth. You see OpenAI's latest model performing this well. You hear a Chinese company beats that, and then you hear Gemini is caught up, and then the next week OpenAI releases something else. It's going to be a lot of that development, but I always love zooming out too and talking with people that are not in this bubble and seeing what their impression of AI stuff is. And I still know a lot of people that are just like, oh, I don't like AI stuff, versus I'm like, oh, wow, I'm thinking about all this day-to-day nuance and development that's happening and going. But for the average consumer base, it's still like, it's always wrong. That's the general impression.
Yeah, definitely for some people.